What's up, everybody? Today on the Yours Truly podcast, I have longtime corner participant, document filmmaker, YouTuber, podcaster, leader, and estuary event organizer, wife and mother, Cassidy Vanderkamp, in the virtual studio with me today. When I came stumbling into this corner of the internet community and culture roughly 6 months ago, Cassidy was one of my first corner encounters. I was trying to orient myself to this space, trying to understand it and play catch up with the rest of the people and personalities that have been involved for years at this point. So I was hopping on any live stream conversation I could, conversations that I understood to be connected to this little corner of the internet, subculture, and community. And Cassidy just happened to be one of those first streams way back in early February. I was excited to join, hop on the stream, and give some thoughts and conversations to the topic of Taylor Swift and culture, which Cassidy has covered in several YouTube podcasts, link below. One of the distinct, interesting, and sometimes criticized aspects of YouTube is that for much of its history, it's been a male-dominated medium. And in this corner, that reality was never made more of an example than through the early criticisms and vetting of the viral Jordan Peterson in the interview questions he would be grilled with about why are men your only audience? And more recently, the culture surrounding the manosphere, which men like Peterson and Rogan many times have been unfortunately lumped into with the likes of Andrew Tate and company. Of course, the answer to that question is nuanced. Nevertheless, YouTube remains a very male-dominated space. And even in my own house, I use YouTube for podcasts while my wife enjoys podcasts on Spotify and or Apple Podcasts. Side note, the YouTube Music app is free and can turn a YouTube playlist like the Yours Truly podcast into a podcast interface that can be easily enjoyed in your found time at work, driving, traveling, or at home. It keeps playing while you minimize the app, unlike YouTube, or lock your phone. So check that out if it makes sense for you to listen on. On Cassidy's channel, you can find podcast conversations with people in this corner like Hezi Sparrow, Aaron Van Oss, Justin Wells, and Luke Thompson, as well as more pointed cultural commentary on figures like Jordan Peterson and Taylor Swift, as well as topics like religious deconstruction, information addiction, and God, Ghosts, and Hell. In her Peterson commentary entitled Peterson's Rise to Culture War Hero, Cassidy makes this comment about Estuary. And for those not in the know, Estuary, or the Estuary Protocol, is a conversation protocol developed by Paul Vanderklay and John Van Donk in their cultural work downstream from the Jordan Peterson phenomenon. Of Estuary, Cassidy said this: "It's more of a trust exercise rather than a means to an end to find the right answers. I've found this to be true and part of the deeply profound work happening in this little corner of the internet." So, this is one of the reasons I reached out to Cassidy and other women in this space for more conversation craft to bring the feminine voice to this masculine arena. I look forward to our conversation discussion today, talking all things Cassidy, Corner, Breakwater Estuary Conference, and of course, Taylor Swift. So without any further ado, I give you Cassidy Vanderkamp. Hi. This is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud. Good evening, Cassidy.
Well, good afternoon, Christian. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so you're in the Netherlands, correct?
Right now, yes. I'm American, but I live in the Netherlands here with my husband and my daughter.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's there's this interesting connection to the Netherlands and this corner of the internet, isn't there?
Yes, well, I think it's because there's so many Dutch people who speak English. So
That's
it's
right.
kind of this crossover that most Dutch people are bilingual, or, if not, have a pretty good handle on the English language. So I think that's why, out of all of sort of the European countries that speak anything other than English, there's this kind of pocket of Dutch people listening.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So on that note, like I kind of paint the picture of how I got to this conversation. In your mind, like how did we get to this conversation? How do you get into these conversations? Why do these make sense?
Just estuary conversations in general, talking to
Sure.
people on the internet. Yeah, well, it wasn't the plan. I kind of stumbled on it when I was still living in the U.S. and I was still a Protestant. I was really struggling to try to figure out how do I kind of get back integrated into church communities after kind of going through a deconstruction that led me to continuing to hold my faith. And I had a friend, Christian, who kind of was like, "Have you ever heard of Paul Vanderklay?" I was like, "No." He's like, "You might not like him, but just go ahead and listen to him." And yeah, that I got hooked. From then on, I was just listening to his commentaries, and then my friend Christian ended up having a conversation with Paul, and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." So I watched that, and then I started listening to the randos conversation, and I'm just very interested in people and their stories. So one thing led to another. I'm just listening to all these randos, and then I was able to have a conversation with Paul too, a couple of them, and then eventually, when the Discord opened, that just opened the floodgates to instead of being a little fly on the wall, watching Paul have conversations with interesting people. We all got to go together in little digital Zoom rooms and have conversations, and so it was just really meaningful and helpful, and yeah, it sort of flipped my world upside down, changed my denominational participation, changed the country I live in, got me married. I have a child through all of it. So yeah, that's sort of why I keep doing this, because it was very helpful for me.
That's really incredible because I mean that's life, right? Like that is, where I am, who we are, getting married, starting a family. Um, in this meaning crisis, that's a lot of meaning, to find. And
Yeah.
you credit this space of as having played a significant role. So how long have you been kind of playing in this space? Oh,
Well, about 5 years now, maybe more, but at least a good 5 years. So yeah, I'm a veteran rando.
yes. Enough to where now, you're I mean, we'll get into this more, but you've helped like start and lead a conference that's downstream, to use the water metaphor, uh, from this kind of phenomenon.
Right.
And so you hit on a couple of things there in kind of that, how we got here, having the deconstruction, the Christian deconstruction of sorts or whatnot. I've
Mhm.
listened to your Paul Vanderklay conversation, but for those that haven't, kind of what happened in your life related to that, and then what were the forces or the things that kind of pulled you start rebuilding from that?
Yeah, good question. So I grew up non-denominational evangelical Protestant in America. So those are a lot of buzzwords, but if you know anything about non-denominational churches, they're pretty modern. Uh, yeah, pretty, Protestant. I think the one that I went in sort of had more of a Baptist flair, but my dad always considered himself a Calvinist, so I had a little bit of both of those kind of extremes in sort of the Protestantism, and for me it was normal, and I don't think I would have always called myself a Christian, I think, but I think it wasn't until I was 18 where something kind of switched, and it was sort of like, okay, I have to take this seriously and like actually live out what I believe, or or do something else. And the do something else didn't really seem like a valid option, because I just saw where those paths went, and they didn't necessarily look like they led anywhere good. So I said, okay, well, I guess I just got to commit to this thing I say I believe and see if it works. And yeah, it definitely changed my life. Um, yeah, in many ways, it sort of got me out of a depressive spell, and I got interested in learning and engaged, and like in the bigger questions, and trying to figure out how to live well. And so I just kept following that. And eventually I moved from Phoenix, Arizona to the Bay Area to go to college for filmmaking. And that's when I started kind of having more conversations with people who didn't believe what I believed. There's there's a lot of very different beliefs, when you come from a very conservative Christian bubble to, very progressive San Francisco, totally different ballgame. But I just loved having conversations with people and trying to understand what they believed and seeing how it compared to what I believed. And I found that having these conversations with people actually, outside of the worry that some of the people from my circles in Arizona had, thinking that it would make me lose my faith, it actually opened the door to me understanding my faith more and understanding what I believed and all of those things. So I spent a couple of years sort of trying to understand what it meant to be part of the church outside of a building, if you will. So kind of not going to the Sunday services, but still practicing Christianity in my life and having conversations with people who weren't. And that produced some really interesting things. And so when I went abroad to Australia, I did the same thing. And that's where I had my first brushes with sort of new atheism. And it didn't change my mind, but it definitely opened up questions about, okay, what is it we believe? And I read Christopher Hitchens' book. What is it?
God is not great.
Yeah, God is not great. How religion poisons everything. And I think I was very scared to read that book when I was first given it. So it was like, wow, there could be something in this page that could basically make me reject the thing that I built my whole life on. But I knew like seconds later, if I'm not scared to read it, I have to, because, I'd rather know than not. And, that was always sort of the way that I pursued faith back then, where it was like, you do it because it's true and you keep doing it until it can be proven otherwise. So I went on a adventure to try prove it otherwise. And that kind of corresponded with some of the political craziness happening in 2016 when Trump became president. And I think for me, it was just this sort of shift. I wasn't very political, and I would say I'm still not very political. But there was something about the way that narrative had been told, where it was like, Trump could never be president, Trump could never be president. And you're just told constantly, and you just believe it without questioning it. And then you're sitting there going, okay, Florida just flipped. Trump's going to be president. What else am I believing without questioning? And so that's kind of when I went really deep dive into sort of the religious questions and some political, but again, that was just kind of trying to make sense of how I consume information and stories and things. But it was mostly religious, of trying to go through philosophy and comparative religion and get a really good sense of if this thing that I believe intuitively, that I can't shake that I believe it, but, I'm not sure if it's reasonable to believe it, is something I should still hold. And long story shorter, I eventually got to the place where it's like, okay, I think it's Christianity. Like, I think that I have enough confidence in everything else to keep going out at that. And like the other things don't seem as compelling. So I'm just going to keep going to that. And very soon after, I moved back to Arizona and was, I was going back to sort of that non-denominational Protestantism, and in kind of in a more extreme way, because it was kind of as modern as you get. You had very modern contemporary music, sometimes rapping, smoke machines, the very end of the Protestant Reformation. And I think after all of that kind of unpacking and uncovering what people saw from the outside in, coming back, there was always something that never felt quite right. I wouldn't say it felt wrong. It just didn't sit well. And so I spent 2 or 3 years really battling that, trying to say, okay, well, church is not meant to be designed to fit the little boxes that make me comfortable. I feel like I'm supposed to be in this place. Let me do my best to kind of plant here and understand what that means and how to make sense of these sort of tensions. And about 3 years in, there was an experience that kind of made me realize, okay, this sort of tension is too much. It's distracting me from like actually pursuing, Christ well. I'm not going to run away, but I'm going to be open to something different. I thought it would be just some other Protestant church, but that's when I started meeting all these Orthodox people. And there was a couple conversations that planted some seeds, and eventually I went to a service, and that was kind of it. I didn't expect it, but there was, I just went to this Vesper service, and something really struck me about it. And then, asking some of the questions to the priest, the answers he gave me sat better than anything else that had been given. So I kind of walked out of the service going, okay, I don't know what this is, but I want to know more, and I don't feel comfortable calling myself a Protestant anymore. And 2 years later, I became Orthodox. Somewhere in between there, I met my husband on the Bridges of Meaning Discord, and he was sort of coming to Orthodoxy in an opposite way, where I was coming from, I knew I was a Christian. And I knew like there was something about Christ that compelled me. I was really attracted to Orthodoxy, but I didn't know. I needed some time to make sure it wasn't just something on a whim that I was doing. And he was coming from the opposite side, where he was agnostic, found Jesus really compelling, really liked Orthodoxy, but didn't know if he was the top of the mountain, if you will. And so, we spent a lot of our relationship working towards that question together, trying to understand if one, both, or neither of us would enter the church. And eventually we both entered, and got married in the church. And now we have a daughter, and she got baptized in the church. And so now we're Orthodox. And so Estuary was a big part of that, in kind of digging these questions and getting exposed to sort of this different type of Christianity. And am I answering your question? I'm realizing I'm at the end, and I'm not exactly sure what your question was.
No, I mean, I talked about deconstruction, rebuilding, so Estuary and the space. You've made, you kind of talked about getting exposed to new atheism. Then you talked about kind of something maybe personal that happened when you got back to the States that kind of said, I need to step away from this space, the Protestant space, does not necessarily towards Orthodoxy, but to something else at that point. And so, what were the pieces that, you kind of in a general sense talked about rebuilding, but were there certain, like, did Jordan Peterson have an impact on you? What were the things? What were the things that had an impact on you in that?
No, Jordan Peterson, funnily enough, like one of my very early conversations with Paul Vanderklay was a conversation about I didn't fully understand the Jordan Peterson thing. And so I would not consider myself a Jordan Peterson fan necessarily. I didn't have anything against him, but there was something about it that was like, okay, these rules are fine, and I'm very glad that they're helping people move towards something more meaningful. But those themselves, like, it felt like there wasn't a sufficient amount to like change your life. You needed something besides that to really have a long-term lasting change. And so I think it kind of wrestled with that of like, how do you make sense of that? And what happens when you kind of get to the end of that and you still feel like you don't have the roots to ground. Now I've gotten a lot of those questions answered just being a part of Estuary communities, because you tend to find people get really interested in Peterson, get helped by them, and then eventually they kind of realize the same thing in a more natural way and end up finding different religious traditions or other types of traditions to help them ground that a little deeper. So
Yes.
It's definitely not a criticism of Peterson, but something that was sort of like, I see it, but I was much more interested in sort of the Christian questions, because I could at least have the confidence to say that was compelling to me. It seemed something true about that. So when I was a Protestant, I listened to a lot of the Bible Project. I think Tim Mackey was a really big help in trying to navigate some of these questions and reframing the way that I saw the Bible. And it was actually an experience I had in Portland at an old church that he went to that kind of put the doubts in me of like, okay, this place that I'm in, it feels like it's more of a deterrent to spiritual growth than something good. Because I just realized for once I wasn't distracted by everything going on around me, and it felt like I could just stand up and breathe instead of like treading water. And so it was sort of like, okay, well, yeah, that's interesting. For me, I'm a very loyal person. I don't often just leave things because it's inconvenient. Like it's inconvenient for me, or I don't like it. It really has to be something very, very deep for me to make a change like that. And so for me, it was sort of like, yeah, I think there is something telling me I have to go. There's something in that pattern that is pulling me, and not even like run away right now, just like be open to something else. And yeah, then it was just the Orthodox questions where all of a sudden I'm realizing, oh, okay, I'm meeting all these Orthodox people. I spent my whole life, I was like 28 years at that point, 26, 28. Can't quite remember when I found it. And I barely heard about Orthodoxy. You hear a lot about Catholicism, but I think I've read maybe a page and a half in some apologetics book about Orthodoxy, which is not really sufficient to explain what Orthodoxy is. And yeah, I kind of went into it not saying, oh yeah, I want this to be it. Just like, well, I probably should at least understand it. And yeah, I remember when I went to my first service, I was not expecting it to change anything. But yeah, I just was surprised how some of the answers to the questions sat with me in a way that other things didn't. And so there was something, and that's very weird because I'm a pretty skeptical person. So when I'm given an answer, it's very rarely does it go, oh, that just makes sense. But, when I was asking questions, the answers just sat in this way that, gave myself a peace. And I think for me, that didn't prove that it was true, but it definitely spoke something to me enough to say, oh, okay, I have to know more about this. And so eventually, the more that I dug in Orthodoxy, that took all of the things that I learned about Protestantism from the point when I kind of tore everything down or let everything kind of fall and examined the damage and tried to rebuild again to, forward. And it like kind of created a foundation that made more sense than the thing I had been given. And to the point where eventually, a couple months before I went to get chrismated in the Orthodox Church, I went to Protestant service to an old service that I had been to the church before I left. And they during the service, they, brought up some Protestant dogmas. And I go, oh, I don't believe that anymore. And even if I wanted to be Protestant, I can't. So what do I do now? And that's when I became a catechumen and eventually got chrismated. So it's sort of a piecemeal of a lot of things. But I think as far as the biggest influence in sort of trying to understand the Bible and Christianity is probably Tim Mackie, but in conjunction with a lot of other sort of apologists, Christian and otherwise,
Sure.
including atheist, Muslim. Yeah, just trying to really understand what it is that these faiths are in like the most earnest way I could.
One of the things that keeps coming up in me whenever we're talking about that is, because you talked about the dogmas and the conversations, but it was like you made a little bit of a differentiation from when you went to the Orthodox Church versus, there were conversations after that, but there was something significant about the embodiment of that. And to use that Vervaekian term, like the ecology of practice for meaning and sacredness or something. And from somebody who very steeped in the evangelical Protestant ecology of practices myself, I've wondered, kind of, because it sounds like your journey was very much in the idea space. It was idea, and then you kind of had this not idea space whenever you came into that worship service or that liturgy, and um, that there's something to, and then maybe not even, maybe the fact that I'm not want to speak for you, but that the answers you given maybe weren't even like answers, but it was like, just go be a part. Or I don't know if that's what you were given or not, but I'm curious if in my wondering of, yeah, coming from where you came from and being introduced into a space that did have a like meaning buried in meaning of the ecology of practices, that was, and you mentioned earlier just about being able to ground yourself into something uh, deep that you can build meaning off of. And anyways, I resonate with that. I don't know if that's me doing a little bit of projection, but I'm curious.
No, it's very interesting because I think the earliest years of my faith, and I would say from 0 to 25, were not really intellectually driven. Now, I came from a family who had intellectual curiosity. So I knew my dad had a lot of interest in theology and all those things. And I guess in some ways I outsourced the questions to him. It's like, well, if my dad's really smart, if my dad believes it, like there's got to be something to it, But then some of the confidence that came from it was not necessarily the theology or the intellectual part. It was when I practiced it, it changed me. And that was enough evidence for me to say, okay, well, I keep moving forward. I think it wasn't until some of these intellectual questions got, put in my lap, and sort of this idea that, well, the stories that I've been told, they're not true, at least some of them, not all of them, but how do we make sense of what went wrong and where we lost the thread of the narratives?
What
And
do you
how do
mean?
we,
What do you mean by not true?
well, like I said with the Trump thing, where it's like you have all these political stories where, and that was just sort of like one of these parallels where it was like, okay, we were told, and especially in the Bay Area, all the time, there's no way Trump could ever be president. The polls don't show it. There's no way. There's no way. There's no way. And then all of a sudden he's president, and it's like, okay, well, we bought a lie, and I didn't even I didn't care who won. I thought both candidates had some issues, to say the least. So it wasn't like I wanted one horse over another, but it was just like, oh my gosh, I just believed it. I just believed there was no way Trump could win. I'm not mad that he won necessarily. I'm just baffled, and I'm baffled that I was so naive to just accept it without thinking about it.
So did that map onto your Christianity as well?
Yeah, because it was like, if I could be so wrong on this thing, which is way less significant than, the whole thing I built my life on, could I be wrong about this? And so that's really when it opened up these like intellectual questions where it really went, really kind of more cerebral with it all, trying to kind of figure out, okay, what's going on? How do we know what's true about religions? How do we make sense of these like differing ideas between the religions? And not to prove my own, because it was like, if I am wrong about Christianity, I would like to know, because I think that there is a lot of value in trying to live your life as aligned to the true thing as possible. And religion is a huge part of that package. So, whether it was Mormonism, Islam, Christianity, atheism, I just wanted to know. And I just wanted to not outsource it to anybody. I wanted to find a way to figure it out. At the time I would say by myself, but I obviously wasn't doing it by myself. I was doing it alone through online means for a lot of it, and some in person, but the healthiest form of it. I'm not sure, but I think it waned and weaved from times, and I think I needed it to understand the process of how you wrestle through these questions. But yeah, I think that at that point it started to become more intellectual, and sometimes I think was that a misstep, but I just think it was the step I needed to take at that time for that period of my life to, I think, even get to the place where I could walk into an Orthodox church, have this like mystical sense of something true and real, and allow myself to trust it the way that I did with Protestant Christianity the first majority of my life.
I like that. The thing that was, when you talked about kind of being alone in that journey, kind of the conversations inside your head. And I relate to that, finding myself here, trying to have conversations out loud, but the piece that it was making me think about was something in one of your podcasts that you recorded, kind of a commentary, was information addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of like that, even through, especially COVID, it was, I think maybe things have changed, or maybe I've changed. It's hard to tell, but that we all feel like we should all be experts on everything.
Right.
and that's intense, but because we have access to a Google search and now AI, and then we could listen, you could get a tweet from this quote unquote smartest person in this field, like instantly, like, oh, well, I know, because that we were all like, and even in the philosophical, theological, kind of perennial questions of, is this true or not? We thought, well, we have the tools, we should be able to, what, then having to then come back down to that, the place of faith, or there, having like an experience that grounds you more than just the, like, I'm going to assent to the proposition of this being true or not. I don't know. That's what it sounds like a little bit, that you went in there, being kind of settled with the ideas, but still having to like be settled in yourself and in your way and your being, into that space. Maybe, I don't know. Is that true? Does that sound correct or connected?
Yeah. Well, explain to me a little bit more about what you mean by settled. Like, I want to make sure I'm answering your question well.
Well, yeah. I mean, some of the people that I've talked to that come to that place, it seems like that, because you're on this quest for what's true, and then you kind of like have to surrender to something that's beyond being able, maybe to be able, and that surrendering is kind of a moment of peace, or the letting go of that ultimate, not that you're not ever going to ask questions again or anything, but maybe with the same kind of like existential, like, I want something you were talking about earlier is like, well, which one is it? That existential question, being able to, I don't remember what you said, something, whatever I said, which was to be settled. Yeah. To be settled.
Yeah. Well, I think what I realized, and I probably didn't realize this when I walked out of that church after that first Orthodox service, I do not think I recognize this, but somewhere along the way, practicing Orthodoxy, I realized you're never going to know what's true merely by the intellectual exercises we play in our head, or the intellectual, games we play, having these conversations, friendly or otherwise, debate or otherwise, about the big questions. You can get a lot of good information, and I don't think it is outside the realm of something that's important. But you're never going to know it unless you put some skin in the game and live it out in life and follow your convictions. Yeah. And I think for me, for whatever reason, I walked in that church and felt this conviction towards this thing that I couldn't explain. And like the surrendering, I had no part in that. I think it was some gift from God to just say, okay, you're going to surrender to this, and you're not going to doubt about it. And I can't explain why that is, because that hasn't been true for me in the decade prior to finding Orthodoxy. But having that sort of faith. And some of it was intellectual. When I was given sort of an intellectual philosophy or theology about the Orthodox frame, and it goes, oh, that makes so much more sense. And then you go, oh, okay. And then you kind of have this eagerness to like keep practicing and learning.
Yeah,
But
participate.
yeah, there was something like when I went in, I just lost any interest of like turning intellectual questions and figuring out theology. Like I would ask them if I had them, but there was no urgency in me to be like, I need to figure this out now. It was just like, the answer will come when it comes. And if it doesn't come, you don't need to know it. It's totally fine. Like you can just live in the mystery. That's okay. And yeah, I think somewhere along the way too, I found The Ethics of Beauty by Timothy Petzius. And that changed the game for me, where all of a sudden my truth first mentality of like, I have to know what's true so then I can participate in the good kind of faded away, where it's like, look for the beautiful. The beautiful will, the beautiful will reveal what's good when you participate with it. And by doing good, it will show you what's true. And I think that has been unbelievably true. And I think even truth first advocates who kind of stand on that framework act more in a beauty first approach than they do truth first without even kind of knowing it. But then there's always some funkiness when it's like truth first, but that beauty is just so powerful. And it really, it captures us in all of these ways. And I think putting beauty back on the table and having that sort of value, have this exchange with the truth good beauty question, really settled a lot of things in my mind on how we think about these questions well. And I think it settled too, because I'm a filmmaker, I'm an artist. And so beauty has always spoken to me in this weird way. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the Bible Project was one of the things that spoke to me so strongly, because they're very, very truth focused. They want to tell you what's true about the Bible as best as they can see it. But they lead with beauty, 100%.
Mm-hmm. Leading with beauty. Yeah. And that, it's almost like it's more objective than ideas. Maybe I don't want to know if I want to go into that, but there's something too that ideas can be manipulated into telling you what it is beautiful versus you being able to maybe observe what like you could get someone to tell you the ideas that a sunset, like the most gorgeous sunset's not, you could if you said, well, that's just X, Y, and Z, and that doesn't mean any, like that's an idea. But if you like, I don't know. I think that there's a lot there that our culture is trying desperately, to hold on to, but also heal from at the same time, hopefully.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the intellectual turning is a control thing too, and I'm a big control freak, so I don't take me outside of falling into this trap by any means. But if you can construct a worldview that makes sense of all of your senses and all of your ideas and intuitions, and you can put a little stamp on it, and you can pwn atheists on the internet with it, then you have this sort of like pride in the thing that you hold. And well, there's certainly danger to that, especially because whatever categories we think fit perfectly in the world, they extend what we know. And yeah, the minute you think that you've got it all figured out, get ready, buddy, because it'll blow up. It'll blow up and change your world, and you're going to have to reorganize your categories.
Exactly. So I want to shift a little to I hit on in the intro, women in YouTube being a masculine place. Like, what are your thoughts on just that generally? I know you've done some videos on femininity or feminine, whatever that, and also just playing in this space that I think is still probably male dominated. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I never know if I'm the right woman to ask this question, because I really try not to kind of think of myself in a women in that sense, where it's like, I go to the spaces that I enjoy, whether there's men there or women there. Like, I just go and participate. But I think as I get older, I understand sort of the tension with those questions. And there's there's a lot of confusion on the idea of the masculine and the feminine, and how do we operate well in those, and how do we operate together in those as men and women, being the best male and female expressions as we can, or I don't know what the right way to say it is, but finding ways to really authentically and earnestly come to answers about how we live our lives with those questions. And I, on one hand, it doesn't bother me that there's a lot of men. A lot of people talk about how do we get more women to come. I don't know if that should be a thing we aim for. I think you get too caught up in pandering to one kind of identity or another. All of a sudden, it kind of makes things wonky, where it doesn't put the attention in the right place, where it's like we should be creating things that are valuable and helpful versus trying to get a certain demographic to come be a part of.
Or create man thing, create woman thing, instead of just create good thing, like you're saying.
Yeah. Well, and there's probably some truth that because there are a lot more men there's going to be a certain participation in the way that we operate that's going to draw more men than if we had more women there. So maybe if we had more women creators and conversation partners and things, it would open the door for more women who want to be a part of it. But I don't know. That's not an easy question to answer. I definitely have a lot of questions on the cultural representations of women. And that's why I've talked about Taylor Swift on my podcast, because I think there's a lot of this sense that Taylor Swift is the ideal for women, the woman we should all aim to be. And I think that's a complicated question. I don't think that is so easily answered one way or the other. Either people for Taylor or against Taylor. It's much more complicated than that. And there certainly are things that she does that attracts a lot of women. She certainly operates in the beauty space, trying to create beauty to kind of package her messages and her stories. And so that's very effective, especially because she's pretty talented at it herself, plus the team that's around her. She's found a way to really capture the attention of people. But yeah, how do we have that conversation about how we look at the cultural landscape of what womanhood is versus maybe what womanhood should be? Maybe YouTube's not the best place to answer that question, but it's the only place I know, so I go there. And I get a lot of men telling me, oh, this is very interesting.
Yeah, so unpack it a little bit. Unpack the parts. You said, should she or shouldn't she be somebody that women should aspire to be? So, and you said that it's kind of nuanced, I guess.
Yeah, clearly there are a lot of things that she's done really well. She's been very successful in her industry. She's achieved I'm assuming most of the dreams that she's wanted to, at least professionally. There's definitely some complications with what that looks like personally. And there's definitely been sort of this shifting narrative over the years of sort of what she aspired to be as far as the good woman or the ideal woman, and how her participation in that archetype, or that moving towards that thing, changed her to where she is now in the way that she sees womanhood. I don't think she really knows exactly what it is to be an ideal woman, yet people are telling her she's the ideal woman. And I don't really think she wants to be that person. And so, yeah, there's sort of this tension where it's very easy to see the beauty and the things that she's created on stage and not look at the narrative in its full context. Because every album that she makes has its own enclosed narrative, which is embodied in a larger body of work that is her whole narrative. And most of her work is based on her real life and her real stories. And even some of the fictional work, there's a lot of, I mean, any fiction writer will tell you, you put things of yourself into those fictional works, even if it's not strictly true. And so, there's some complications where all of a sudden she's kind of made a myth of herself. And so this embodied narrative that she's putting out to the world to consume is not even really the truth of the narrative she's living. And so, there's a lot of mixed messages of what she thinks the ideal woman is, and how she feels she's living up to it, and how she wants to tell your daughter to live. I don't think those questions are being well answered in the cultural commentary that we're having.
But so would they be not well answered as in something like Taylor good, Taylor bad?
It's like rah, Taylor. Taylor's the best. Girl boss, womanhood, whatever. And then it's no, Taylor's a sexist billionaire who
Antichrist.
is too much. And it's just like, and she can't find a man. And it's like, you guys, this is so much more complicated. And there's a lot of complications with Taylor too, because throughout her career, she's always stood really confidently about like, this is a story I'm telling, with no sense of uncertainty. Yet 3 years later, when the new album comes out, you realize, okay, this narrative that you were portraying, you don't have as much certainty in as you do now. And that was never more evident than sort of the Midnights album, where you saw these very fragmented stories throughout. And Midnights is basically its concept album, 13 Sleepless Nights in her life. And so she's revisiting her history of like her whole life and some of the music that she made before, in sort of in conjunction because of how she writes. And you just see a really conflicted person, and you see all of these different narratives that are all, or at least were true to her at one point, but don't make sense of a full life and are full of contradictions and complications. And I think that's sometimes hard to really remember when you play one certain song, which tells you one certain message, totally out of context of the rest of the album and the rest of her body of work. Like, and I talked about it in my last video, but you look at a song like Lavender Haze, which opens the album, which is sort of this girl boss, feminist, I don't need marriage, I just want to be in love. And then you go to like a Midnight Rain, which is basically talking about how some guy wanted marriage and love and she just wanted fame, and so she let it go. And then you have Bejeweled, which is like, I don't care about your love, I just want to go out and I want to be pretty and shine and entertain everybody. And then, how many years later, when her relationship breaks up, you get You're Losing Me, where you have a song that said, I wouldn't marry me either, which obviously puts that thing of like, okay, did you really not want love and marriage, or was there something happening here that was stopping that marriage question? And so you kind of convinced yourself there. Like, it's just so many complicated answers.
On her newest album, isn't the big controversial song the one where she said she would have died for you? Like, I think, which isn't an emotional response saying, I just want all this other stuff. It's like, I would have given it up for you, which would be contradicting those.
Yeah, well, and again, there's a lot of complications with that album. It's hard to talk about that album because it's so tied with gossip and tabloids, and I hate that crap. But there's definitely sort of this thing where Taylor Swift is this like hopeless romantic, where she really just wants to be loved and love someone, and she wants that forever. I think the stories that she's been told in modern media and music are not very helpful ways to get that forever. And it sort of kind of corrupts us in our pursuits for those things. And it kind of,
she represents that we're living in a contradiction in a way. And the thing that, this isn't exactly tied to what you're saying, but something, I actually just had a conversation with Neil deGrade from Dirt Poor Robins, and I asked him about Taylor Swift. And,
Oh, yeah.
he's like avant-garde, like artist. And, uh, he didn't have very nice things to say, but it was it was still interesting. And he's like, "I don't get it." And, you know, I think I told you this, in that a long time ago on that stream we had, or that you were doing, that I popped in, and I have a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old daughter. And so like Taylor Swift's a big deal at my
Mhm.
house.
I can
Um,
imagine.
and, but what's interesting is, like my 14-year-old, she's much more of an artist, and with Taylor Swift's body of work, like she has songs from when she was 14. And my
Mhm.
daughter is attracted to her like more vintage music that's when she's in junior high, high school, and like, and then, but my 10-year-old just likes the pop songs, the ones that like she likes the bangers or whatever.
Yep.
And I completely out of context, but as you were saying, but that to me, she kind of, one of the reasons that I see her success being is that we don't have a lot of shared experiences anymore, and a lot of that got put onto her culturally, especially, and that was not seen any more clearly than at the Super Bowl this year, where the narrative, like my 10-year-old watched the whole Super Bowl just to see the little bits of her and Travis Kelsey, like that. I'm saying she has no interest in football, but we shared an experience, and she shared that experience with a large part of the country, and there was this story and this drama. And everyone was playing into it. The media was happy. That's enough. Nope, all
Yeah.
press is good press. Like
Every everybody's happy except my dad, who's just a Chiefs fan and just wants to watch the game, but they can't
but
stop talking about Taylor Swift.
everybody but the pure football fans. But
Yeah.
like that was kind of the thing, was doing that with my kids. Like we had a party, like my wife wanted to do, like we all dress up, and it was fun. And I think that we're like, that's anemic in our culture. And that was also, what I saw in the advertising that this year was, um it was like all old A-list actors in every commercial. Where when I was growing up, Super Bowl commercials were funny and interesting, but you didn't see A-list act, because that was the only time almost everybody's eyes were at one place. Like used to,
Mhm.
that was in sitcoms, and that was in commercial, that was in like, and those moments are evaporating because everyone is just fragmented into quote unquote Netflix and the like, into our own little individual
Mhm.
YouTube and everything. So she is also interestingly positioned in where she's at, because she is one of the few shared experiences of the culture right now.
Yeah, well, and I think what's true about Taylor Swift is because she writes about her life, particularly in like her romantic world. Certainly, she writes about other things, but like let's call a spade a spade. She writes a lot about love. She has an interest in that, and that's totally okay. But because she writes so vulnerably in that way, she is tapping into a shared experience with a lot of women, which is sort of this, and men, but like she writes more particularly for women about this sort of shared experience of trying to have it all, but it not quite working out. And they're sharing in that confusion, and they're sharing in this like um, this chaos. And so they go, "Oh my gosh, me too." And you have this over years and years and years of her writing in these very vulnerable times, and two very vulnerable groups, which is usually women, you know, 10 to 20 something. They kind of get hooked and then they stay. And I think a lot of people like to um, blame Taylor Swift for it, like she's part of the problem. And that's certainly a conversation to have, but you can't have that without also saying she's also a victim of the problem, where she was living out stories that she was told, and now we're seeing some of the chaos from it, and that's really sad. This is what makes me really sad about Taylor Swift, especially the last album. There's all of this pain and brokenness that is coming from what she's writing, and we're just like bopping along to it, like, oh yeah, feed us more. It's like, I'm sorry, I would rather you not have all of that pain and brokenness and that complete isolations, because nobody treats you like a normal person. than have this music. And like the last song that she had on the album was called The Manuscript, and it basically tells the story of questionable relationship that ended in heartbreak, but at the end she kind of says, but now I know what it was all for, basically talking about how, I was able to take this, turn it into something beautiful, and now it's not mine anymore. The story's not mine. It's shared with everybody, and we can revel together in this. And there's something optimistic about that. But similar to how I feel about Jordan Peterson, it's like if that's where it stops, we're gonna have an issue when we find the end of that well, and it's not a very deep well.
That sounds like something Martin Shaw could have written about, like, this isn't my story. I heard him actually say that, in where he's at, but obviously it landed into a, steeped tradition. And, but
well, let's be clear. Swiftyism is a steeped tradition.
Yeah,
I'm not here to say it's like a very spiritually healthy one necessarily, or one that you should build your life on, but it is a steep tradition.
Yeah, it is, because but this is something that's very interesting. The way so her, some of the biggest pop stars right now are actually songwriters. Ed Sheeran and Taylor Swift are actual songwriters. They're not performer. They weren't the greatest. I mean, they now are great performers. And Ed Sheeran was he did his solo stuff. So, but like, at their heart, they're actually songwriters. And I think that actually is a testament, and their works, their bodies of work are, they look at them not just album to album, but as like a large body, yet they're pop. And I think that's actually kind of interesting in this time as well, because that there is a lot more meaning to be found in that journey than some guy in Sweden is writing, 10 songs for this artist to, Bieber or Katy Perry or whoever, to be a image of something versus the person of something. So I think that it's easy to look at her, Taylor Swift, and think just another pop icon, but she doesn't actually. Part of the reason I think some of this is happening is because she actually isn't that exactly as well. I don't know.
Yeah, well, the thing with Taylor Swift is she likes to break the conventions. She doesn't want to be what people say she is. And so she's constantly trying to push the edge, trying to reinvent so that she is not the thing that the critics said last time. And so there's something about that kind of pushes her and changes her and morphs her so that she can find her way into different kinds of groups. And she's very self-referential through all her music. And so it never more clear than this last album. It's just like full of these like weaving things, and it's like, if you don't know anything about Taylor Swift, I don't know how you like this album, because it's such an in-joke. And I think she's fine with that. I think she wrote it as an in-joke. There's something about that where I think, especially in the YouTube generation, people don't just want good music. They want good music that connects them to the people who made it. They want content that connects to the person who made it. They don't want a studio sitting there pulling the strings, like, and of course there's a studio behind Taylor Swift pulling strings, but there's certainly a vulnerability that she has traded in her writing and in sort of the imagery and the way that she's created content that opens the door to a sort of parasocial relationship participation that keeps people wanting to come back for more. And you're just going to see it more and more, especially with all of the artists coming behind her. She set a path for like a whole generation of songwriters to be trading vulnerability as a currency in their music. And it might get them famous. It's going to come at a cost, though. And like, you can look at Taylor to like be an example. She's incredibly successful, but she's been very open that all comes at a cost.
Well, the interesting thing, I mean, that's true. and something I'm thinking about even doing this myself. But the thing that you said there about parasocial relationships, so let's let that kind of transition us into talking about Estuary, because that's part of the deal. Like, so what
Mhm.
would you say, and maybe for people that are listening that have never heard the word parasocial relationship, but use that in describing why you see such a value in the Estuary protocol?
Yeah, well, and it's funny that you mentioned Estuary because I do see a lot of parallels in what Taylor Swift does to what we do in Estuary. We just do it in very different ways. We are not writing pop songs. We are having conversations on the internet, but we're being incredibly vulnerable and using that um, not in a manipulative way, but as a currency to trade and create this trust as we share each other's stories and try to learn from each other. And because it goes online where people can watch it who don't know you, not really, it all of a sudden opens you up to feeling like they do know you. And then they can speak into your life and you should listen because I know you. And it's very weird and very odd. And, and how would I describe a parasocial relationship? It's basically sort of a relationship where you feel a personal connection to someone who you don't actually know. You only know them through screens or through some body of work or podcast or writing or something. And so this odd feeling like you've never met this person before, but you know them. And it goes the other way too, where often as creators, you have certain, I don't know, a reverse parasocial relationship with the people who watch you, especially if you're creating on YouTube, because you're reading comments and you're seeing people go back and forth. And in Estuary, where you have all of these sort of independent creators and a sort of network, you see faces, you kind of know people, but have you ever had a conversation? I mean, Christian, this is probably our first real conversation. We've definitely exchanged words before, we've talked before, but we've never sat down together and had a conversation. And so we're basically strangers, um, assuming that the other person is trustworthy and that they're not going to try to get you as we're both trying to figure out these questions of meaning. That's super powerful, especially if you do it earnestly, but it comes with its own dangers. And that I think that is why I'm very much interested in seeing Estuary find its way outside of online platforms and into in-person communities, because it sort of breaks down that weird disembodied relationship and gets you more grounded into reality. And it doesn't become as much of a show or sort of a, how do you call it? Like a power dynamic game. It's really people meeting people who are trying their best to figure things out and find better ways to have conversations with those who think differently than them.
So there's the two pieces of so people like yourself and myself now have a body of work. You can look at that. You can learn some things about that person through that. Things are important to them, interested to them, and then come in to have an actual conversation. And it's like, but you haven't spoke to this person to a
Yeah.
degree, and then, but then there's levels of that to where, um, like, you were saying that, say somebody that might go to something that Paul Vanderklay's at and they've watched 300 of his videos and he's never, he might have read a comment or two, and then, but you're meeting, um, this silver screen effect is real. And I even experienced going to Symbolic World, like after even I was playing here for like 2 months. And what was strange though is because I had watched hours of Peterson and Peugeot and some Vervaeke and Paul, like you have these touch points that make sense that that don't need a lot of explanation, and that um, but then seeing people in real life it is a different, and it's an important part of the future. So
A big
go ahead.
part of like the meaning crisis is like a lot of personal and emotional issues that you don't know how to deal with, right?
Yeah.
Like, and there are varying levels to those things and varying levels of like openness about those things. But like, there are a lot of things that, a lot of burdens that come with trying to figure out these questions. There are limitations how you can help with those burdens online. Now, there are also limitations of how you can help with those burdens in person, but there's certainly a more grounded, approachable way to deal with them than, say, you're living
Right.
7,000 miles away from someone. And, I think you kind of have to work both in tandem. I don't think that Estuary should ignore its roots, because its roots do come from the internet. But if you only want it to be online, I think you're going to have diminishing returns. I think eventually it's going to be so disembodied and get so caught up in culture war stuff, which in some ways I feel like Estuary has been a response in some ways to culture war, of trying to have a lot of those conversations in a more civil way. That's not just about proving my own point, right? But trying to steelman both points and figure out how to best orient yourself in them, in whatever way you can. And so, yeah, I just think that there is a value to, not letting it be disembodied heads on the internet. And, it's so funny. You were doing my introduction. I was like, wow, he makes me sound so accomplished. It's like, I don't see myself that way at all. But it's just funny where it's like, well, all of those things are true. And just seeing that sort of like sense of the sort of outside view of how you can be approached versus how we see ourselves and how we embody ourselves. Because in many ways, I'm just an idiot trying to have conversations and figure out how to live life meaningfully. And I think that's, I won't claim that everybody thinks they're an idiot, but I think a lot of us are just trying to do that in whatever ways they can. And I've met plenty of people much smarter than me, so I'm glad to be in that group figuring these things out.
Part of it is, I think this work in this space, the way that I've encountered it or came to it, and the reason it makes sense to me, I do think it's important in for the future to a degree. And so there is a part of me that's like, hey, highlight this person and elevate them, not in a false sense, but this is, not everybody put together, I don't know if you've got 50 or 100 videos or something, like not everybody's taken the time to do that. Not everyone's put together, tried to lead and put together conferences. Like those things take energy, they take time, they take commitment, they take talent, to do these things. And no, we're not all full-time this or thaters, in this world. But I think that at least a part that I feel like I'm trying to play is to continue to stretch this goodness out. One thing I was looking at when I was like, oh, I'm just kind of following this pattern. Like Cassidy's done this before. Other people have done it. You get online, you're like, oh my gosh. And you just start doing, like, I'm going to make a podcast. I'm going to make some commentary and all this stuff. And all that's not all, but part of what it's doing is just allowing other people to say, I can do that. That's how I felt when Chad had me on a podcast. I was like, oh, I could do that. And, and I think that's important because this, like you're saying, the conversation is important, and the ability to have that conversation outside of your head with other people and creating a protocol that helps us to do that, even though it should maybe be natural. It hasn't been. Our speech has been locked up. And I think part of it was, that 2016 time, and even through COVID, like from that time through COVID, I think everybody was so inside their head. You're either inside your head or you're yelling at everyone. That was like, there was no in between.
Sometimes both, all at the same time.
Yeah. And that you use the term steel manning, and that example was given to us. I remember Brett Weinstein saying that to Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris to invite them to steel man the other person's position. And that before that, it was always, how do I attack and beat this other person's position? Mm-hmm. And so these things are downstream. Those, like that word, that steel manning, is downstream from something that took place that we're still now using and embodying and maybe trying to help give the world. So like as we're kind of coming up, I've actually got a trip I've got to get ready for, but could you just talk about Breakwater a little bit and, give it a promotion there at the end?
Sure. Breakwater Festival is a European-based estuary event. We are on our third annual festival. The first 2 years were in Germany, where we were participating with the Mannheim Estuary to create an event for their community and sort of the greater Europe. And this year it's in the Netherlands as we support some of the burgeoning estuaries here and trying to help them get more consistency. And we use the estuary protocol during the festival, but we also bring speakers all over Europe and sometimes America, just really all over the world. We try to bring as many diverse voices to come together and have conversations, but then not just sit and watch them have conversations, but be able to have conversations with the speakers and participate in all of these different ways. Because I think at the end of the day, estuary is a protocol. Well, estuary, and there's obviously the estuary protocol, but estuary I think is still in development, and what it will be and how it all shapes out, I'm not exactly sure. But I think estuary as a whole is really trying to open that space where religious and non-religious people and people of all walks of life can come together and have better conversation. But the end goal is not that it's just continuous conversation. It's opening a space so that we can have that conversation in a more productive way, to where it eventually leads you to get off the armchair and start living. And so we find various ways of like participating and trying to really focus on community and people to help people who need a little bit of courage and support to have somewhere to go through those questions. So that's kind of our goal and our aim. We really tried to partner with local estuaries and make that give a help to those local communities so they can dig deeper roots. So we don't own any of the estuaries. We're not we're not in the estuary planting business. We really just kind of want to support and give a space where people can come together and experience what has been happening online in a more grounded way, for those who have been participating for a long time, or even those who haven't, because there are a lot of people who are very online averse. They don't want to be online, but they do want to have these conversations. And so having these in-person events gives them a really kind of concentrated way to do that. So I don't know if you have any other questions about it. That's sort of like the gist.
When is it happening? Where and who's going to be there?
Yeah, so this year it is July 5th to the 7th in Leusden, the Netherlands. It is at the property of Bas van Os. He is the father of Lucas and Aaron van Os, who are pretty well known in this little circle. And he's one of our speakers, along with Stefan Solomon. She's Charlie's Little Corner on YouTube, and Sarah Fulmer, both who have been active participators in estuary in person and online in various ways. And the theme is touching grass, finding grounding in a digital age. So it's really about kind of going in nature and trying to figure out how do we move away from some of this online participation and get grounded in our own realities. And along with the theme, we decided this year we won't be recording any of the talks or conversations. So to be able to hear all of their lovely talks, you will have to be there in person. But we did do a little bit of a pregame on Paul's channel, kind of converse about what sort of the topics are, and kind of did a mock estuary protocol, and kind of had a conversation to promote that and start that off. So I can give you the link to the ticket site as well as that conversation, and all of the information for the talk or for the festival is there. And I'll give you an email too. If anybody has questions or anything, feel free. And if you are in the Netherlands and there's some reason that you're unsure, please reach out to me personally. We're always happy to make this as accommodating for anybody. And so if there's a way we can help with any sort of restrictions, we try our best to do so. Especially if you're in the Netherlands, this is an event really aimed for that community. And so any Dutch participant who really wants to be there, we're going to do our best to get you there and be able to participate in any way you can.
Awesome. Cassidy, thank you for coming and having a conversation with me. And it's great to get to know you better. So
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, maybe we can do a follow-up from the from Breakwater later on this year.
Sure, that would be great.
All right, have a good day.
Thanks.
Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in and staying with us until the end of today's episode. Your support and digital connection is deeply meaningful to me. If you've enjoyed our conversation and believe that these conversations bring real value to your life and in this space, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. By doing so, you'll be helping me reach the goal of starting channel memberships, where we can continue building a TLC, this little corner of the internet sub-community. My hope is to be able to further cultivate digital community on this channel, to be a space where kindred souls can engage in deeper, more intimate discussions from various corners of the corner. Thank you again for being a part of this journey.